Amit Gurbaxani, a Mumbai-based journalist specializing in writing about the Indian music industry. Amit has been a feature writer for over 2 decades. His work can be read in Billboard, Firstpost, India Today, just to name a few. He is the co-founder of the Indian Music Charts podcast, the country's #1 music commentary podcast. Please join me in welcoming Amit Gurbaxani for our last masterclass this week. He's going to be talking about significance of media coverage for artists.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in on a Friday evening. This was kind of like when I saw this topic, I kind of thought maybe it should be called "What is the significance of media coverage for artists today?" which is kind of like what I might be talking about. But hopefully, it will be an interesting session. Can I share? Can you like share my screen? I guess, right? Sorry, 1 second. So let me just see. Yeah. So I have a little sort of presentation that I'll do, and then then we'll sort of make it into more of a discussion where everybody can ask questions, and maybe I'll ask you some questions. So let's start off, I guess. And everybody can see my screen, right? Yeah. 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 Cool. So of course, yeah. So firstly, I wanted to just start off with like what is the media today in the first place. I think we back in the day when you thought of media, you thought of really traditional forms of media like newspapers and magazines and basically print media and electronic media, TV, and then radio, and then websites and things like that. But today, I think when anybody thinks of the media, I think it's really social media that is probably a more powerful tool for people to sort of go through. And that means, all your social networking sites, whether it's Instagram, which I think is primarily, especially for indie artists today, and especially Indian indie artists, I think Instagram seems to be where everybody is at. I don't see too many people on like Facebook or even X or Twitter or even Snapchat, but like it really seems to be that everybody just seems to be concentrated on Instagram. And I think one of the reasons for that is perhaps because short format video and reels are another big, huge thing right now. And we don't have TikTok, so reels is going to have to be the biggest one. And I think everybody who has a campaign today kind of has to include some sort of short format video promotion into it. But then, I mean, I think when you talk about media, I mean, I think if you just broaden your, mindset a little bit, you could even include things like WhatsApp and like I've got so many requests from like artists now to sort of join their WhatsApp broadcast channels, and that's like another sort of form of media. Some people experimented with Discord, some a little time ago. I don't know how many of them are still active. That's another kind of place. And then of course there's YouTube, which not only just to upload videos but to do different kinds of things. From like listening parties and what basically each form of this media is kind of lending itself to different kind of opportunities. And now when I'm speaking here, I'm speaking as a perspective of a journalist. So it's like kind of where do journalists fit in today in this kind of landscape, which is what I'm going to try and talk about. So what is the role of the music media? And when I say this, I'm really talking about what is the role of music journalists today, right? I mean, I kind of joke and call myself like a endangered species. I think because basically there aren't very many music publications, especially in India. There are not many mainstream publications that write about music, and even fewer publications that write about indie music, which is, I guess, where a lot of you come from. So what is really the role of, the music media, and how has it changed? Today, basically, artists have their own channels of information, just as we spoke about, like I just spoke about, like social media, for instance, just really put the power in the hands of the artists, right? To kind of being able to reach out to their audience on their own without having to depend on all these other people or publications or anything like that. And you have a sort of a direct channel of communication to your listeners. And your listeners, once they become your fans, they essentially become your network, and they help amplify whatever message you're trying to spread out. So essentially, the media is no longer the gatekeeper of information, which is something that they used to be, back in the day. I mean, there was no other way of communicating with your audience, right? You had to route it through these sort of large media outlets. And, today that's no longer the case, which is, I guess, a great thing. Uh, and in the past, I guess, like in the physical format era, the sort of media, and in that I'm talking specifically of music journalists, told you what was worth your time and money, right? Like if it was worth going out and spending your money on this album, or going out and spending your money on this concert. Uh, Today in the streaming era, all the music in the entire world pretty much is available to you, at your fingertips. You can decide for yourself what you want to listen to. So what that means is that the media are no longer tastemakers. I mean, essentially, it was back in the day, you'd have the ability of a journalist to really create a fandom for a particular band. If you were a trusted voice, if you said a particular band was good, people would listen to you and would really, take your word as a gospel, essentially. And I think that role has diminished a little bit. Like the journalists are no longer tastemakers as much as they used to be, which is kind of a sad thing, but also a good thing because, why not? It's better to have the lesser the concentration of power, I think the better. So what role does the music media play then? I think what basically today money is not the currency unfortunately, when it comes to the music industry, by and large, especially when you look at like streaming. But what is the currency is time. And, there's so much music out there. There's more music being released than ever before. So basically, your trusted media professional is the person you turn to help you decide what is worth your time, what is worth your while, and so essentially they're playing the role of the distiller of all of this information and all of this, uh, you know, basically all the sort of avalanche of material that's coming your way. And how do you decide what to do? Of course, there are things like playlists. You have all of your streaming platforms coming up with their own playlists, and like new Spotify has New Music Friday, for instance, where every Friday they'll put up a bunch of the new releases. But it's kind of like basically the modern day equivalent of top 40 radio, wherein essentially you have in that such it's like a hodgepodge. So if you're a particular fan of a particular genre, or you only listen to a particular type of music, then you probably won't find it on a New Music Friday, because it's just got everything that's out there. So even when it comes to music, it's something like that. I mean, you might find yourself skipping tracks that you don't like because it's not exactly you're more likely to sort of depend on an algorithmic playlist, I would imagine then. So a journalist can come in there and say, hey, these are the new music. This is the new music that's out this week, and this is what I think is worth hearing. And if you trust that journalist's opinion, then perhaps you would look to them to do that for you, to provide that for you. The other aspect of it is that the music industry is in a constant state of flux, and I think that's happening more than ever before, especially with the developments in technology and how closely related to the worlds of music and technology are these days, which perhaps wasn't in the past. AI has just become something that everybody's talking about, and it's become like almost like this bogeyman that the mention of the word only just makes people a bit kind of like wary. And technology and algorithms and stuff like that is just constantly affecting the way that people, basically musicians have to navigate their own careers. Um, they're sort of constantly trying to stay ahead of the algorithm, right? So, but at the same time, if you look at the supply side of things, micro genres are being created every single day. If you just look at like the kind of, if you ever look at, actually the list of genres that something like the Spotify has, it's a pretty like intriguing mix of things you probably never heard of. And songs are getting shorter because of like the way people are consuming music. Genres themselves are getting kind of, I would say, almost disappearing in a way. With a lot of musicians nowadays making music that doesn't really fit clearly into a genre. So it's quite an you know, it's basically like the wild wild west, and you kind of need somebody to help you make sense of it all. And that's where I think like a music journalist may come into the picture and help you make sense and understand what's happening. And there for so instead of a tastemaker, now they're playing the role of maybe an analyst, and helping you kind of understand what's going on. And which is where I think that has changed. And I can give my own example of my own career, where I used to be more traditional journalist, where I would write reviews and features and interviews and those kind of things. And over the last few years, my career has kind of transitioned into a place where I'm more music business journalist, where I analyze trends in the Indian music industry, and basically what people are consuming, why they're consuming it, what are the ways in which the industry is changing, and I think that has also sort of helped. I mean, and I'm constantly told by young musicians that it's helpful to them. And so perhaps I feel that sometimes, while I'm not really, helping individual musicians as much as I used to before, wherein, if a new band would come about and I'm also a freelancer, so it's more difficult for me to sort of write about newer bands these days, because a lot of the publications, they only want to write about established acts, which is sad. But what I feel is that maybe I'm kind of, instead of helping individual musicians, I'm trying to help a larger, more upcoming musicians understand their own careers in a different way, as opposed to writing about one and helping, sort of break them, which is something that I used to do, like say maybe 10, 12 years ago, like being the first to write about some bands that have gone to have pretty great careers. So that's, I think, how my own sort of, career has changed. But then, as somebody who's also run a few websites and magazines in the past, what I have realized is, what do media consumers want actually today? Because, like we said, they don't necessarily want things like reviews, for instance, right? Because if I can, an album review, you're probably seeing less and less of them, because if I can go out and like, listen to the music for myself immediately, and the day that it's released, and I don't have to go into a shop and buy it and decide whether I want to spend my money or not. I don't need you to tell me whether it's good or not. I can just log on and listen to it myself and decide. So what do they want, right? So this is what I've discovered at some of the websites that I have, launched and run, and magazines that I've worked at. Today, essentially, what people want is information and informed opinion. Now, why information? Like I said, information is on everybody's fingertips. So it's not necessarily that they need access to the information, but I think what they need is somebody to actually just put it all together and present it in an easily digestible format. For instance, like listings, you might think that it's a very sort of simple kind of thing, but gig listings is something that there's kind of like a demand for. And so many people tell me, like, where do I find gig listings? And I myself depend on a WhatsApp group called, I mean, no, actually, what I do is I just individually, because I've been doing this for years, I individually go to all the ticketing platforms and see what gigs are happening. But a lot of people I know use this this WhatsApp group called Some Good Gigs. And Some Good Gigs has become this place where everybody depends on to find out what gigs are happening that week in their city. And they have like city specific groups for multiple cities. And I know that a lot of people depend on that. So that's what, like, and that's a form of media consumption, even though it's not something that immediately strikes you. But the guy who runs it, a friend of mine, Pankaj, I mean, he is essentially a creator in a way, even though all he's done is essentially created a WhatsApp group where people post gig listings. So people want that, right? They want to know where this is happening. And some people also want like previews rather than reviews, because sometimes there was just a brand new band that's performing, for instance. People are kind of curious and want to know what it's about, have a little more information. And so previews are actually far more popular than reviews, So like, for instance, there's a reggae band from Shillong performed last week in Bombay at a bar called Bonobo, and a band, again, somebody that might have heard of, but there was a little piece in it in the Midday, which is a local newspaper here. And I'm sure people would have read that piece, and if they were like excited enough by what they read would have showed up for that gig. So there's still value in that, in providing information. But the second aspect of it, I think also, is that there's just so much, just like there's too much music being released, there's just too many gigs happening, too many music festivals. There's very few places to actually find it all in one place. So I think that really helps to have somebody just gather it all together and put it together in a way that, is that you don't have to go hunting around to because some gigs will be on a Book My Show, some will be on an Insider, some will be on a Skill Box. So how do I find it all in one place, right? But yeah, the other main thing that I think people want today is informed opinion. And this is what I found constantly when I was running these websites, but the most read pieces would always be the weekly gig listings, and it would be some kind of opinion piece. It wouldn't be the straight up interviews. It would be, or the straight up profiles. It would be like if somebody came out and had a very strong opinion about something. People want to either read something and say this band is the best thing that you never heard before, or this band is the worst thing that you should ever hear. And they want to either nod their heads in agreement, or they want to shake their heads in rage. It's like, that's why you see sometimes a lot of the comment section will be really, who are the most used. And it's all about audience engagement, right? Even on that's why I think people move towards social media, places like Instagram, for instance, where there's constant engagement, right? I know, for instance, the Indian Music Diaries, who the guys who work there, I know them very well. And from what I know, their Instagram is so much more, I think, popular than their website. And they also do a great job of covering newer artists. But their Instagram page is probably one of the most, well engaged in amongst all the music publications in the country. I think people just want that ability to sort of, now I am not just a consumer, right? I'm also a participant. And so when you have somebody putting out an opinion, the ability to sort of agree or disagree and to voice that agreement or disagreement is what people really want. And it's almost like an emotional response. So, I mean, this is all a bit of context setting to our larger, conversation today about the significance of the media. But again, who needs the media, right? I think that you kind of have to distinguish between the stage of your career that you are at. I think that, for instance, established artists don't really need the media that much today, very honestly. I think that if you are a established act, you may not even bother with reaching out to the media. You might simply your fans are your media channels. You just put up something, and within seconds, for instance, there's a Peter Cat gig showcase. Peter Cat Recording Company is a band that somebody might know. They are launching a new album. They're doing a small little gig today in Bombay. I think they just sent out on their newsletter a little thing saying that this gig is happening. You can RSVP. I think it's a free thing, and within minutes, it was probably sold out. So they didn't need any media to cover the fact they're doing a gig, right? Because they have enough of a fan base. They have a direct line of communication through their newsletter. They have people signing up directly to that thing. So if you're a new established act, I mean, this is something I've discussed with people. I'd like to know what value the media has to establish artists see the media having. I still think it does, but I think it's the upcoming artists that need it far more, and because basically when you're trying to establish yourself, you're trying to get the word out there. The media can be a powerful tool in getting people to know about you. And one of the pieces of advice I'd say is that, there's loads of smaller blogs and publications out there. And if you are an upcoming act, I'd say just say yes to everything, because at the very least, you show up on Google if somebody, writes about you. And sometimes, as somebody who's trying to do research on, say, an act, I'll find there's absolutely nothing written about an act, right? Sometimes, because musicians themselves can be pretty lazy. And I have done this piece for TuneCore, which is essentially a guide to putting together a press kit, which is unfortunately, I think it's not available anymore, but because they're changing their website or something, but it will be back on soon. But amongst things that that advice that was in that sort of guide was the least a musician can do, an indie musician can do, is put up a bio, and you'll be amazed at how many don't have bios. So you have to make it easier for people to find out about you and learn about you, and just make a press kit. And so I think there's definitely value for as far as new artists are concerned, because that's what really, I think, when you're new, and just to go back to a point that I mentioned earlier, there's so much music out there, so many musicians releasing music. How do you stand out? And one of the ways to stand out is just having people write about you, and people, who like your music, championing it. And so I think it's far more significant when you're upcoming to sort of have. That said, I think it's also important to build relationships with the media, and to sort of go beyond just having a transactional like relationship with them. So that's something, an aspect that I think it's quite important. But I've just, I actually went into my inbox and saw the last sort of 10 to 15 press releases that I received, and tried to see that what are people reaching out to me for. Now, like I mentioned, because I'm not a traditional music journalist anymore, I don't work for a music publication, so I can't really write about a lot of this stuff, but I'm happy to receive it. And this is the kind of general expectation that people do reach out to. And one of the pieces of advice that I had mentioned in that guide was, of course, only reach out when you have something significant to say. And I'm glad to say that most of these press releases that I received were about something significant. So the most common things that people wrote to me about were like saying, I have a new single out, or I have a new EP or a new album out or coming out soon, or I've just released a new music video, or I'm going on tour. Now, for me personally, the most likely or the most successful I have been with, pitching stories to the kind of publications I write for is when somebody has a tour, or if they have a new album out, because these are kind of significant career milestones. But that's just me. If I was working for a music publication, all of these would be relevant. But this is where I found that most people reach out, and I think they're all great sort of times to reach out to the media. And what do they want, right? Say, what do they want? Sometimes people will just say, I hope you can feature it. Now, that's a very vague kind of like ask. But I think people, thankfully, are more specific, most of them. And this is what they've asked for. Things like announcement. Can you just announce it? Which, again, as a freelance journalist, that's something not something that I can do. But if I were in a traditional music publication or magazine, there's often a new release roundup, and I guess that's what they mean by announcement. Then of course they'll ask for reviews, which again is kind of like I said, it's sadly one of the least read things I've found nowadays. But some people also ask for feedback, especially to me. I get a lot of, it's fine if you can't write about it, but I'd love to hear your feedback, and while I love to do that, it's very time consuming. And there is a tool called Groover, which actually formalizes this process where you can submit your track to get feedback from a number of like music experts from around the world. But it's kind of an expensive proposition if you're in India, because it is a paid service. I am signed up there, but again, I haven't, because of time, haven't been able to do that much. But that's another thing that people are looking out for, right? Then, of course, they want features, they want interviews. Sometimes they'll just ask, saying that, can you just share it? Which I think is a great thing to do, because you're not asking for much. And all you're asking is that if you listen to it and you like it, can you just share it? And I think, what if, like, say you send it out to like 20 journalists and 3 of them like it and share it, and you're just reaching out to like a brand new audience. And I think, that is something that I think that's just a simple thing to ask and a good thing to ask for. The other strange thing that like this was a rare one, but like this clearly tells you how the media landscape has changed. One of the requests was like, you can either do this, or even a reaction video. And I've always found reaction videos a bit strange, because I rarely ever hear anything of substance said on them. You just have this thing of this influencer, which I've not even talked about yet, because like I haven't talked about the music influencer and people, looking to that, because I don't know whether they come into the form of music journalism, but that is something that's also happening a lot. And these guys will essentially just look at the video and just like nod along, smiling, and then say, yeah, this great beat, yeah, whatever. And like there'll be very little actual analysis of what that song is about. It'll just be literally like giving you a ball by ball account of what this person is saying, or lyric by lyric account of what this person is, of what the artist is actually saying. And yeah, it's a groovy track, and they'll use really sort of generic terms, and rarely do they ever actually say anything of substance. So I don't know what the reaction video's purpose is. There's of course, like, when it comes to musical influence, there's also you know I guess there's just a mass kind of audience that people are looking for. But I think the last one is far more important. And this is not something that actually gets asked for. It's just something that you earn, which is credibility, right? I mean, if you are written about by a certain publication or by a certain journalist, there is a certain amount of credibility that you are earning, which I think, a lot of musicians seek, which is, ultimately, I think the goal from all of these is just essentially to somebody to get a sort of a kind of endorsement. And, that automatically becomes something for you to include in your bio, for instance, if should you write it or you update it, like you say that you've got some kind of like, praise and, sort of a co-sign by somebody who's a well-known name in the music industry. But what does get artists covered by the media today, really? The first one is really simple. It's just a great sound, something that I'd never heard before, something that really just strikes a chord with the listener, and then they just love it so much that they really want to write about it. And I think this is just really the most simplest and the way that it should be. And hopefully this is how most pieces get written about, through an actual strong love for the music itself. But quite often, it's not just a great sound, it's also a great story. And that great story doesn't necessarily have to come with a great sound, but it's, and this just goes beyond the music. And I think that's why you'll find, and this is not like, it's not an exact kind of comparison, but if you even look at something like a reality TV talent show, right? The most talented people don't always get the maximum face time. It's always the people with like the most unusual backgrounds and the most sort of, I guess, interesting stories that are given, that's just the camera focuses on. Again, this is just going back to what audiences want. Unfortunately, what's happened with the media has become so concentrated on, eyeballs and, views and things like that, that it's really, there's few risks being taken today. So I think that people tend to go for the lowest common denominator approach, which is not the ideal scenario. There needs to be more, people need to be more brave, writing about weird things, different things, which is also there, but, you probably see it less or less. And the last thing, I guess, which it will get you written about, is just a great achievement. I mean, this is of course less helpful as for an upcoming musician, because, how do I get, I mean, I need to become something before I can actually achieve something. But this just becomes a no-brainer then, right? If an Indian artist gets nominated for a Grammy, if an Indian artist, hits the global chart, everybody will want to write about them, but, essentially when your story becomes too big to ignore, everybody's going to come and, write about it anyway. So I think that's pretty much what I had to say in terms of a presentation. I wanted to next sort of like get to asking basically maybe a Q&A session, or asking basically some of those of you who have joined here, firstly, to you today, what does the media provide? What does the media do for you today? What are you seeking from, as a musician or somebody in the music industry? What are you looking for?
So, can I share my point here, Amit?
Of course, yeah.
So basically, I'm an upcoming artist, and say I have come out with my debut album, grunge rock album. So when I submit my entry to say Indian Music Diaries or Rolling Stone India, I'm basically looking at some kind of review or a feature, so that people who follow these channels on Instagram, they might know about my existence. Otherwise,
Yeah.
me sitting here in say Delhi and making a project with my producer and putting it on Spotify. So with that, nobody will actually know about it. And also the fact that, as an upcoming artist, you try to pitch to, you know, to a music distributor for playlisting on Spotify.
Yeah,
More often than not, it's very difficult to get through a playlist because they have their own, criteria as to what songs make it to the Indie Fresh Fridays.
yeah,
Make it to a playlist. Your only way to, get some awareness is through, the media channels which cover independent music. Or it
mhm,
also could also be, music journalists, who are open to listening to new music and
yeah.
talk about it on their Instagram.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, so you're looking for basically, like you said, somebody to cover your music so people get to know about it. So I mean, my response to you would be then, I think then you should sort of tailor your expectations accordingly. If you are basically brand new, I would say that reach out to them saying, can you feature me in your new release roundup, for instance? Like I know that Indian Music Diaries does do a singles roundup once a month or something like that, I think, or like Rolling Stone will have something called What We're Listening to Today, where they'll just upload tracks and they may not even write about it, but they'll just sort of have this compilation of tracks that they'll just upload. It'll be like 5 tracks with either the music video or the audio track, embedded onto that page. So I think if you tailor expectations, then perhaps you have like a higher chance of getting a positive response than going straight up to say, can you feature me or interview me or write about my album or review my album? I think that should perhaps maybe like get you somewhere, at least in the beginning. And when it comes to, playlisting, I think that a lot of new artists I think they spread their, expectations a little sort of too wide. If you say you're making a grunge rock album, then it's probably better to pitch for the Rock in India playlist rather than New Music Friday, you know. And even if you look at the kind of music that, say, a Fresh Finds does, I tend to find that they kind of stick to a very similar sound, like a Radar or a Fresh Finds, right? They tend to go with a very singer-songwriter, E territory. So maybe your sound doesn't fit into which is not, I guess, considering there's a supposedly genre agnostic playlist. That's not exactly the ideal way it should be, but I mean, you're working with what you're working with, right? So you have to maybe sort of say, hey, I think this will work for rock in India, So, and then go there, rather than trying for a radar or, India or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. I see some questions in the chat.
Yes. Hi, Amit. I think I'd asked one of the questions
Yeah.
out there. Yeah.
Hi.
So I've been helping two Indian classical musicians. We just come up with an EP, and I'm wondering if that is, I mean, there would be an appetite with journalists out here besides pop and rock music, to take a look at a genre, something like that. He plays electric guitar and he's playing ragas, and that blew my mind. So we actually got down to recording. I mean, like he riffs completely. If you actually go down to music, the pentatonic scale ragas, and so I figured we really needed to do something about that. And so we've got like 3 songs out. It's actually on Bandcamp. It's coming out on 14th on Spotify, etc. But to build awareness, it's also been recorded in VR with a VR headset. So I'll put a link in later if it's of any use to anyone else. But I'm looking at reaching out to some journalists out here to maybe cover this. It's like I would say it's crossover in a way of rock music with Indian classical in that sense.
Well, then, I mean, I would say like there are all the music publications. Like I said, there are very few. We've already
Yeah.
discussed people like Rolling Stone and Indian Music Diary. There's also Score magazine. But because, like I said, you have something that's a little bit unusual. So, and while this has been done before, not many people are doing it. So maybe you look at the fact that it's, you know, there's a little bit of a story here. So reach out to maybe mainstream newspapers and publications for whom this might be of interest,
All right.
rather than just limiting itself to music publications and reaching out to like the culture sections or the culture editors or the features editors of the Times of India, the Hindu, Midday, Indian
All
Express,
right.
those kind of things, because the thing is, unfortunately, I mean, understanding like there is very little, the culture pages don't exist anymore, right? There used to be a guy or girl who used to write specifically about Indian classical music back in the day, maybe like 30 years ago, for the Times of India, which no longer is there. Doesn't happen anymore. So what you're more likely to get is maybe somebody in a features team who thinks that this is interesting. A guy who's playing Indian classical music on the guitar. He's not the first one to do it, but here's another young guy trying to do it. So maybe they might be interested in it.
All right. Yeah.
To, uh, somebody else. Basically, because you don't have people covering Indian classical music, as
Okay.
far as I don't know. I mean, very few people. Yeah. I don't even know who write. I can't remember the last time I read a Indian classical music. Really, I mean, I know that there was a girl in the Indian Express, but I don't. I mean, I don't get that paper, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Cool.
It's good to
We
know.
had another couple of questions. Would you like me to answer those, or yeah? Well, you had one more question about the WhatsApp group. Yeah, so WhatsApp group
Yeah.
doesn't look reviews; it's only gig listings.
Okay.
Yeah, and some other questions. So yeah, go ahead
That's
and
right. So yeah, because I'm kind of like well, I've been in India before, and I've just now setting up a network because I've just been here for the last 6 months. But yeah, I did meet with Midday. I mean, they'd written something else about the VR stuff that I've done. It was out. But yeah, I'm more focused now on the actual music.
yeah.
Design. But you've given some really good tips. Thanks for that in this webinar itself. There was a place you said that they upload the music. What was that? You just
Groover.
mentioned
It's
some.
called Groover, and I think there's a link dropped in the
No,
chat.
that is for the critique, right?
Yeah.
So
For
is there
feedback.
another one that you said that they pick it from there then and they will play it out? Maybe I misheard it.
No, I don't think so. I
No.
mean,
Okay.
no,
All right.
no.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Oh, oh. Thanks for the question. And Samarth, I think, has a question, and then we can get to Sharai. Yeah.
Hello, so I'm Samarth. So first of all, thank you so much for all the info that you gave, and I follow your this thing. So, I've seen your interviews, and I really like how, at one point you said that a journalist's work is to journal. So that is what they do. That kind of sticks with me. Thank you so much for that. I had two questions. Firstly, that I am an independent artist, like a singer-songwriter, as well as I am a music producer, as in I produce music for, for other artists and all.
Yeah.
So my question is that whenever I promote my music as a singer-songwriter, along with that, I have releases on my Spotify which are sung by other artists. So when I do submit my music, suppose, say to a blogger or a journalist, does that really affect my image as an independent artist? Does that affect, how I show myself?
Not at all. I think it's actually an advantage you have that because you are doing two things at the same time. And I think that, of course, it's dependent on what you want to focus on, but I think that there are a lot of people who have similar careers, right? I mean, I think there's somebody from the Yellow Diary who has a very successful career as a producer, but I don't think he really puts out his, producer. That's very much like something he does, and is probably equally successful at, but doesn't really, I think, put so much out there in the public domain. But it's totally up to you, and I don't think it's a disadvantage at all. And I think that it's really that okay, if you have like say a single or an EP as a single songwriter, and that's what you want to talk about. That's what you talk about, and that's probably better chances of you to get written about, right? Because as a producer, not many people write about producers, unless you get to a level of say something like a Says on the Beat in the hip hop world, or who's really sort of defining a sound, so but I think it is valuable to still include that and to mention that you produce some tracks, and sometimes the tracks that you produce might be more successful than the tracks that you make independently, right? So that might be, it almost might be like, hey, you may not have heard my original music, but you probably heard this other song that I produced, and I'm the guy behind that song, that sort of has what have been featured on like this playlist or that playlist or whatever, even though your songs may not have got there yet, right? But it's a great advantage, I think, to have, and to kind of, so you need to just package it carefully just to say that, look, I'm presenting to you my own work, but this is my background and this is this work I've done for other people, and this is the kind of recognition that it's got, so, but, here's my own music and have a listen to it.
Right. Thank you so much. And I had one more question that since, in the indie space, we are more, like a community, so to say, is there something that, we can do to, help the blogs out there, or, help the journalists out there? So, I mean, it's not exactly like a give and take transactional kind of a thing, but whenever I approach a journalist, for example, I was featured on Rolling Stone, like the Friday releases.
Yeah.
And that is, because of Rolling Stone, I got to know about David. So,
Yeah.
I started following his music, I started following Arrows, and started
Yeah.
sharing his stuff. So is there a similar kind of a thing that we can do for the blogger community out there?
Well, I mean, I don't think you need to do anything. I would say just make our lives easier by having a bio, having a well done press kit, having don't sell files, send links, just hygiene things, just like make it easier for us rather than like, clogging our mailboxes, and just literally just hygiene things of just making it easy to find stuff and easy to, upload things and listen to things, and having a recent high-res photo that you have, just literally stuff that will make our lives easier as a thing. But that's great to know that, you discovered sort of, and that's exactly what I was suggesting to Abhishek, like sort of just, that's what Samath has got is what I was suggesting to you, write for them to feature you on that playlist. And hopefully that did get you a few listeners at least, right?
Yes.
And get you to some people. And yeah, I would say, like I said, I mean, don't think of it as a transactional relationship. Just think of it as a relationship that you develop over time as, I mean, it's difficult because, I mean, traditionally journalists and musicians are not supposed to be friends because like, there should be some kind of editorial kind of, distance. But I wouldn't say that I'm not friends with any musicians. I would just say that like I'm friendly with a lot of musicians, and I think that you ultimately you're dealing with human beings where whatever you're dealing with, right? Whether you're dealing with sort of like with your band if you are performing live, or whether you're dealing with a journalist, or whether you're dealing with anybody, right? It's essentially sort of just I think that think about it as just like don't complicate it. Like just put out your music there, share it out there. If you happen to meet somebody at a gig, go and say hi. Maybe strike up a conversation. It'll all be cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, Sharaya, can you share your question?
Hi, Amit. Good evening. So, my name is Shaira. It basically
Shaira,
is like,
sorry.
I write, sing, and rap, and
Okay.
rhythm and poetry. If I write poetry, it's like shairi. So, that's how the name came about.
Okay.
My question is pretty similar to the one that Samarth just asked.
Yeah.
I have I'm into music. I make hip hop and rap content, rap music, and I'm getting into content creation as well. So
Okay.
although I have an idea of how to like go about it, there's just a little bit of apprehension to go ahead with it. So my music is mostly hip hop and rap, and the content that I would be creating is going to be mostly travel vlogging and outfits, fashion, mostly that.
Yeah.
So am I supposed to create two different pages for it? I know this is like a different question than like
Yeah.
journalism. It's a confusion in my head, and I think you would be able to answer that.
Yeah.
So
See, I mean, I honestly, I'm not like a social media expert. So I don't know whether I'm best placed to answer this, but from what I know is, uh, like your fans, I know that you're sort of more upcoming, so it's kind of tricky over there. But from what I've understood is like, as a musician, your fans want to know all aspects of your personality. So it's really, it's okay to have them in all together in one place, at least initially. if you find that one is superseding the other, where essentially, it's not just you showing off another aspect of your life, but your pages start becoming only about fashion or only about travel, and then your music is kind of taking it's on the back foot and it's not really coming up on the front, then perhaps you need to have two different places. But at least initially, I think that you can help them feed off each other. You can have people who are into fashion, are into travel, then sort of get introduced to your music through it. But really, one of them starts superseding the other, then it might be time to maybe shift out one of them. For instance, if you find your page is just becoming, a fashion page, then maybe start a new one for the music. That's
Yeah,
what.
my only apprehension here is that there's a stage name and then there's a real name, right?
Yeah,
Stage name is Shaira, but the real
yeah.
name is Sneha. So like I don't want to mix them, I like so to speak. I would ideally want them to have separate pages. It's just that the content creation aspect of making music is tough for me. Like I don't know when it became like content creation. Like you have to create content to promote your music, although it's like easier compared to the 80s and 90s. But like what
Oh,
kind of content can I create on my page which would not just be related to music but also related to my other.
so I'm a little confused about your question, because are you saying that you are content creation as in creating reels for your music, for instance? Or is that what you're a little hesitant about? Or are you saying that content creation related to other things that you're interested in?
I didn't get that, sorry.
No, sorry, I'm not sure when my voice is sort of like breaking, but I didn't get your question about content creation. Is there a reluctance to create like content around your music?
Yeah, no, both actually. Content creation is also like I have separate content creation aspirations for travel and fashion, and I
Yeah,
have to create content for music page as well, right?
yeah.
So how do I, yeah, if I'm putting all the content on one page, what kind of content can I create which would showcase not just fashion but also my musical journey?
I think you have to just do what feels natural to you. I mean, I think that, a lot of musicians feel pressured to constantly create content. And I don't think that you necessarily need to bow to that pressure. You do what's fun for you. So there doesn't start feeling like, of something that stresses you out. So if you don't feel like creating sort of content or reels about your music, just don't do it. Just do the stuff about fashion, about travel, if that's what you like. And if you feel that you have two different aspects of personality that you want to showcase and you want to do the other stuff under your real name, do it under your real name. If you think that it's fine, I mean, to have it all under one, I think that's also fine. But like I'm saying, if you don't feel like doing the stuff for your music, don't feel compelled to, right? Because there's other ways to put your music out there, right? It's not always going to have to be, uh, you don't have to join that sort of hamster wheel of putting out a reel every time. A lot of musicians have managed to do it without. Again, it really depends on your ambitions. Once you maybe get a little popular, you can hire an agency to help you with this kind of stuff. So at the beginning, at this stage of your career, I would say just focus on what's enjoyable, and don't necessarily get overwhelmed by this whole aspect of it. Focus on making music, really, literally. Just focus on the music rather than making content around the music.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Secondly, I also wanted to ask you, specifically you, if you had to feature my songs in your article or share it on your page, like what kind of attributes or qualities would you want it to have? Like Rolling Stones mostly posts English songs, right? But you specifically on your page, if you have to share a certain kind of song, what kind of attributes do you look for in it?
So I don't actually share much music, unfortunately, because like I said, most of my stuff is around like the music business. But I mean, really, I mean, the stuff that I share is mostly stuff that I think that sounds different and unique and really stands out. And I'm more like a little bit old school. I'm more likely to see somebody live and then watch them live at a gig. And if I really like them live, maybe take a little clip of that and then push that out on my social media rather than I'm more kind of that way. Sort of that's usually how I usually post stuff on my personal pages. I don't really share much new music on my pages as such. What I do instead is I have a Google Sheet, which some of you might know of, which is unfortunately only for albums and EPs because it's too difficult to maintain one for singles as one individual. So every year I compile an entire list of Indian independent albums and EPs. It's in a Google Sheet that's publicly available. I haven't put out the one for 2024 because it's not as, I'm saying it's not as well, it's not as thorough as the ones I've done before, but it's already got about 100 names on it. But the one for 2022 and 2023 are on my Linktree in my Instagram, so you can find them there. So if you have an album or EP coming out, I will gladly add it on there. I think we have just time for just one more question. I think Abhishek, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, follow up to that. So just wanted to let you know that, my album got out in November 2023. 10 songs all as singles.
Okay.
So these songs made it to independent magazines like, Rolling Stone, Extravaganza, Indian Music Diaries in under various sections. Like one song was part of Fashion Week Fridays, two of them are part of like Rolling Stone Daily, which comes out every Friday, once a month of daily music coming in. So my only request was that, I wanted to submit my album to you just for a review and feedback because this is my first album.
Oh, for me. So like I said, I mean, like, you might have already sent to me, but I'm overwhelmed with emails. It's really difficult for me to sort of like, go through everything that is, if I get a chance, I will, but like, I can't promise that I'll be able to sort of see it because it's like I get a barrage of stuff. I was doing this through Groover, which was a little more systematic way of doing it, but I haven't been able to keep up with that either. But hopefully, I will, send it to me. If I do get a chance, maybe I'll have a look at it. Yeah,
And email ID is Amit Gurbaxani at gmail.com.
that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll just share a follow up on the mail which I already shared.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the least I can do for you is add it to my sheet.
Can add to the list of 2023 albums.
Yeah, I'll do that for sure.
Rest I leave it in your good hands, whatever you.
Yeah. So what's your performance name is the same as your name?
So my name is Abhishek Hazarika. The album name is called Brighton Dash. Brighton Dash.
I think I might have already added it, but I'll check again.
Sure. And I'll share.
Yeah, because what I think, I have a feeling I did remember seeing your album and I couldn't find it in one place. So because it was released in singles, I don't think it was actually compiled as a single album. So I couldn't actually link to it. So the issue was, I think that it was still showing up as 10 different songs.
Right, it's still showing like that only.
So that's what I think you need to do. I think you need to, that's why I couldn't add it. I do remember seeing your album and I remember wanting to add it and just not being able to because of this issue. So if you could somehow figure out a way to, I think this way that Spotify allows you to do that is just put it, maybe make it a compilation or something. And, so just all the tracks show up together.
Album basically, album listing basically.
Yeah. So it shows up as one collection of songs. So right now it shows to me as 10 singles. Yeah. So I mean, I wasn't sure it was an album. Like I know that Rolling Stone said it was, but I was like, but I can't see it as an album. So what's going on there? But I now that you mentioned your performance name, I do recollect this. Yeah.
Okay. So let me find a way to do that. So it'll be easy for you to add in that list. And then,
once you do that, I'll be able to add it. Yeah.
Got it. I'll do that.
Yeah.
Cool. Then probably share that to you.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Amit. The session was truly valuable. All these artists are independent, and you taking time to help them and guide them and navigate them through their journey was great. Like the session was great. The presentation was great. We will share something on YouTube so you have like a recap for the masterclass. But once again, thank you so much to take time out on a Friday evening to talk to independent artists.
Thanks for having me, and I hope it was interesting for everyone.